Since 1950, the American School of Tangier has been as truly international as the city it serves.
For 4 decades, an extraordinary head of school, Joseph A. McPhillips III, defined the institution's standards and values, and brought the leading figures of his time to the AST campus. Mr. McPhillips made the annual AST play into a showcase for the school in the wider community, with plays by Tennessee Williams staged in the same square in the Medina where Williams wrote it, a play with costumes by Yves Saint Laurent and with music by Paul Bowles. Today, drama remains a core part of teaching effective communication at AST.
I'm the new head of school for AST. I'm in my 5th year, and after Joe McPhillips passed away, there were 5 heads before me, and that was in a quick 8-year period. Well, truly, the AST mission has not changed since 1950. We have a new package, but it's the same mission. The mission is to educate children to be all that they can be in the world stage as well as locally. Together, we are trying to, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create a better world. We're trying to fight climate change. We're trying to fight the dissolution of global trust. How are we going to do that? We're doing it through education. We're doing it through our children. And, frankly, we're going to change the model of education here at AST. As we know, Joe McPhillips was an amazing educator and he had amazing results. And also he was very traditional. The children were in straight rows in desks. They had distinct assignments. They had very little freedom in terms of what they were allowed to choose and how they expressed themselves. A test, an assessment at the end of a course was a written exam. 2 years ago, we received $1.1 million from the United States government, from USAID, the Agency for International Development, through the American Schools and Hospitals Abroad program. 2 weeks out of every quarter is going to be student-driven project-based learning. And that learning will be based on the interest of the children and, we hope, directed towards climate issues. As a school, we've adopted 7 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And my hope, and I think really the only salvation for the world, is that we empower students right down from 1st grade up to address these problems together. Because climate change is not going to stop thanks to some adult. As you can see, the world stage is in chaos. Trust is gone. We need our students to approach these problems at the local level and then transmit them out to a countrywide and a global level. Same thing with trust. AST graduates contribute to the world. You can see them in the United Nations, you can see them doing solar energy, you can see them as diplomats. They're everywhere. And that is a piece we're going to continue. AST will continue to serve the world. We are here, we are solid, and I hope you'll come along and see what we're doing, join the ride, help us address climate change. And together, AST can not only change education here in Tangier, but we can change it across Morocco.
I'm Karim Benzakour. I'm 58 years old. And I've been working at the school since September 1988. That's when I joined the American School of Tangier. I was hired by Joe McPhillips to work as business manager. I was young at that time, and for me it was the first time I was going to work in an office, be a administrative manager. And I have to say that the job turned out to be quite exciting because shortly after I started working at the school, Joe got me involved with things like plays and graduation ceremonies, and it was fun for me. It was different, not being just sitting and counting numbers and making reports. So quite exciting. Joe was quite a character, as a lot of people know, and I learned a lot from him and with him. So I worked for 19 years with Joe McPhillips until he passed away in 2007. So as I said, besides business manager, I had to handle things like big theatrical productions. It was a privilege to meet people like Yves Saint Laurent, Pierre Berger, Oliver Stone, and many others, right? Who came to Paul Bowles. In fact, thanks to the school, I've then had an 8-year-long friendship with Paul Bowles, and who used to compose music for our school. So that's for the time I spent with Joe McPhillips, 19 years, until 2007 when he passed away. But I also know a little bit about the history of the school because I was very much interested after he passed away to find out more about the school. And so I can tell you that the school was launched in 1950 when Tangier was still international, and Tangier needed an English-speaking school. Tangier had the Spanish school, had the French school, the Hebrew school, the Moroccan schools, the Italian school, but didn't have an English-speaking school. So some Americans got together, people working for RCA, which then became Voice of America, and Coca-Cola, and all these big American corporations, met and said, let's open an American school. And so that's what happened on October 1915. They rented a small villa up in the Marchand area, and they started, I think, with 67 students of all sorts of nationalities. And so that's how it began. 1950-52, it was a small house in the Marchand area. 1962, they moved to the second building, which still exists now, and it's an amazing, beautiful building. Now it's owned by a private Moroccan school, and interesting building because the German emperor stayed in it early 20th century when he visited Tangier. And then in 1962, this school where we are right now, which is a big piece of property, was inaugurated. Was inaugurated after a one-year construction. Beautiful buildings built by French, actually designed by a French architect and built by Spanish. I mean, we still have in 1962, international people, expats working in Tangier, and so this land was purchased, was quite much bigger than what it is now. Right now it's 6.5 hectares, which is about 15 acres. But in the 62, when it was inaugurated, I think it was at least twice as big. It's just that in the 80s, there was a financial crisis at AST, and they had to sell a big portion of that land to the Moroccan Ministry of Education. And so it was inaugurated in 1962 by the sister of King Hassan, late King Hassan II, Lala Aisha. And at that time, the director of the school was Omar Pound. And I mentioned this because Omar Pound is the son of Ezra Pound. And so a lot of people always remember this name and think that he was the first director. He was not the first director, but certainly a famous name. And there it goes. 1962, the Speak campus opens in Tangier, and interesting school because it was a mix of all nationalities, all different ethnic backgrounds, religions. Of course, Muslims, but Christians, Hindus, Jewish, and so it made the school quite special. Very open, tolerant. And the mix was interesting. And in fact, people that I still get in touch with now that attended the school in the 60s and in the 50s speak about this not only beautiful city of Tangier, but the amazing American School of Tangier that was here to give them a rather good education. Yeah, talk about education. The school has given a chance to many people, especially Moroccans, to get a very good education. And we ended up with ambassadors and amazing business people, but also scientists. We have so many graduates who've become big professors in America, working for American universities, including MIT. And I think this is a school of quality, and that's important to emphasize on.
The founding of the American School of Tangier. I particularly want to welcome the alumni who have come from as far afield as Japan to join in these ceremonies. This school was founded in 1950 by an international committee in an international city. And I think that with its 20-odd nationalities, it still reflects today a feeling of diversity and individuality. Frank Wisner, Ambassador of the United States of America to Egypt, His Excellency D. Michael Uttery, Ambassador of the United States of America to the Kingdom of Morocco, and Mr. Sumner Rulon-Miller III, Chairman of the Board of Trustees. Introducing me to Proctor Academy. And because of his interest in both schools, as well as that of Christopher Norris and Proctor Academy, we have an active and creative exchange. I depend very much on his moral support, and it gives me a great pleasure to introduce my friend and the chairman, Mr. Sumner Rulon-Miller.
Students, the American School of Tangier, Ambassador Drissi, Ambassador Wisner, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to celebrate a vision which was conceived 40 years ago by 8 individuals who had a unique wisdom and had a unique perspective of what education should be and what education could become. Education was a blend of traditions and poetry, a vision that education was a blend of circumstances combining security and risk, a vision that education was a blend of discoveries to reconcile disciplines and freedom, a vision that education was a blend of an atmosphere where diversity of thought creates liberation rather than tension. A vision that education was a blend of the alien and the unknown, which increases one's perspective of oneself and the world about him. A vision that education was a blend of the community beyond the classroom, and a vision that education was a blend of courage and strength to take the risk. As the American poet Robert Frost clearly states, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that had made all the difference. We are here today to celebrate these visions. We are here today to celebrate the graduates. To those of you who has a spirit quite like the American School of Tangier. No other school in America has an integrity quite like the American School of Tangier. No other school in America has a sense of mission quite like the American School of Tangier. No other school in America would be made to celebrate. George?
In 1963, Headmaster Omar Pound established the Headmaster's Prize with the following wording. An award is to be established and given on graduation day to a member of the senior class who, in the opinion of the headmaster, has not only maintained a consistently high academic record, but has shown unselfish devotion and service to the school, and in so doing has set an example to others. Since 1963, the award has been presented only 16 times to students of 6 different nationalities. As the school celebrates its 40th anniversary, I am pleased to note that in the audience there are 5 past recipients of this award. Diana Adams in 1965, Driss Drissi in 1966, Nourdine Drissi in 1976, Stephen Eastman in 1979, and Hanley Rundy in 1987. I first met Ambassador Wisner on the campus of Princeton University when he was a freshman. At that early stage in his life, he already knew that he wished to pursue a career in diplomacy, and that his principal concentration would be in the Arab world. Coincidentally, his first assignment was to Tangier to study Arabic. Over the years, I followed Ambassador Wisner's career as he moved up the ladder in the State Department and became the youngest ambassador of this century when he was appointed ambassador to Zambia. He worked for Chester Parker for the independence of Namibia, peace in Angola, and an end to apartheid in South Africa. Today he serves as the American ambassador to Egypt. A prominent Egyptian mentioned to me a year ago that no American ambassadors made such a magnificent impact on the Egyptians as Frank Wisner. I think he stands for what is best in the State Department, and I am deeply honored by his presence today as this school celebrates its 40th anniversary. Your Highness, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Frank Wisner.
سمو الأميرة الجليلة سعادة أمن إقليم طنجة المحترم السيد السفير الولايات المتحدة برباط، سعادة الشيخ محمد الأشماوي السيد رئيس المجلس الإداري، السيد مدير المدرسة الأمريكية بطنجة، سيداتي وسادتي، السلام عليكم. يسعدني أن أعود لهذه المدينة الجميلة التي أحبها كثيرا وأعرفها جيدا، مدينة طنجة، عروسة الشمال، جوهرة المضيق، ميرات المغرب. بدأت فيها دراستي للغة العربية وعشت فيها بين أهلها الكرام أجمل الأوقات. يشرفني أن أكون بينكم اليوم في هذا الاحتفال يا خريجي هذا العام. إنه شرف عظيم لي أن ألقي كلمة بمناسبة العيد الأربعين للمدرسة، فإنني من أشد المعجبين بمدرستكم هذه وساهمت به على مر السنين في تعليم الشباب وبناء جسور الصداقة بين العالم العربي، المملكة المغربية والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. والآن سأستكمل حديثي باللغة الإنجليزية. Your school to address you, particularly the graduates of this year's senior class. It is a special honor to speak on the occasion of the school's 40th anniversary. I am your long-standing admirer. I admire the unique contribution the school has made over the years in educating young men and women and in building bridges between the Arab world, the King of Morocco, and the Kingdom of Morocco in the United States. The United States has enjoyed no more firm nor long-lasting ties of friendship than it has been privileged to maintain with this kingdom. The history of the United States has been intertwined with Morocco for 200 years. When America's army landed in Morocco in 1943, your kingdom and my country turned a key page and embarked on the most important phase in our long relationship. With Morocco's independence, the United States and the leaders of your land, especially His Majesty the King and his distinguished father, forged a partnership nearly unique in America's relations with the Arab world and the African continent. In their thousands, American travelers have discovered the wonders and beauties of Morocco. Programs of cooperation have prospered. American businessmen have invested, and this school has grown and made its mark. Its graduates, like hundreds of other Moroccans, have attended universities in the United States, many to return here and continue building the modern and proud country which Morocco is today. And our governments have pursued common objectives in the world. As this century draws to a close, and as our exciting and unpredictable world adapts to its new birth of freedom, we, Moroccans and Americans, must continue our cooperation. Each of us can shape the future and strengthen our relationship if we see the way clearly and follow it as partners and friends. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in extraordinary times. New graduates leave this institution and enter a new age, a new world, one of unparalleled opportunity, but also one of deep challenge. It is a world very different from the one I knew when I graduated from secondary school almost 35 years ago. The shadow of the Cold War darkened my world. I grew up in war and lived with the threat of global strife and nuclear confrontation. It was a world, moreover, marked by the destruction of the most treasured of human values, freedom. Soviet armies overran the nations of Eastern Europe and imposed communist rule on them. Much of Asia came under communism's sway. Collectivist economic doctrines were in vogue, and centrally planned economics were touted as the path to prosperity. Democratic practices and human rights were in peril, and not only in the totalitarian nations of the East. While the candlelight of freedom flickered, it remained a light, thanks to the sacrifices and dedication of my country and countrymen and millions of others, like us and like you, around the world who kept their faith, believed in God, remained committed to liberty and the practice of democracy. I cannot pretend to tell you where the world will be 40 years from now. I can tell you that we as Moroccans, Americans, and citizens of other lands must do to preserve the gains we have made, to promote stability, to cement freedom into place, and to protect it from future onslaughts. It is essential that all of us face the future with confidence, sure that the values which made it possible for us to live in a new age of freedom are those which will endure and will guarantee your prosperity and security and that of your children and grandchildren. Graduates and friends of this school, I ask you to entertain this afternoon two thoughts about the future. First, there are those today who argue that the end of Soviet domination in Eastern Europe means that the United States and nations of the West will turn their backs on the developing world, including the Middle East and Africa, and devote our development assistance and private investment to Eastern Europe, thereby depriving the Third World of its chance to grow and realize the dreams of its citizens. Many thoughtful spokesmen of the Arab world look at the freedom of Eastern Europe as a threat to their region's future. They seem lost in the perception that my nation and Western Europe cared for the welfare of the Third World only as long as the Soviet Union was a threat to us. They argue with Eastern Europe free and Western Europe headed towards 1992, the needs of the world's developing peoples will be forgotten. I believe this analysis is wrong, very wrong, and worse still, it paralyzes action. Few of us should quarrel that Eastern Europe's freedom is a marvelous event. None of us should argue that Eastern Europe and other nations have been shaking loose the chains of communism should not aspire to the economic benefits which all of us enjoy or seek. We must welcome Eastern Europeans into our liberal economic order as equals and partners, and we should extend our hand. But their arrival does not mean they will displace your country, the nations of Africa or the Middle East. Nations of these regions will receive development assistance, investment, technology, and trade if they decide to compete and will reshape their economies to make them attractive. The speed with which nations of the Third World adapt their economies to the demands of free and competitive marketplaces will determine their ability to obtain aid and investment. You, young men and women from Morocco and neighboring countries, have a huge challenge in front of you. It will fall to you to clear away the entangling restrictions which encumber your economies, to open your marketplaces to private enterprise, to competition, and to growth. You will design exchange rates which provide realistic value for the trade of goods and services, interest rates which encourage savings, capital markets which intermediate investments, privatization of state enterprises, pricing policies which reflect real costs and provide incentives for growth, export policies which put your economy squarely in the world's marketplace, and policies of openness which permit the free flow of ideas, information, and services. I believe that your generation will as well face and meet the challenge of expanding democracy. The conditions are good. A society which is governed on the basis of democratic principles is one which will mobilize the energy of its citizens and attract the attention of nations abroad. Nations which do not adopt democratic practices, be they in Eastern Europe or elsewhere, will not compete because they will not tap the potential of their citizens. Young men and women in the Arab world will enjoy an additional special advantage. During the decade ahead, hitherto unimagined sums of money will flow to the petroleum-producing nations of the Arab world as the United States and Europe increase their energy dependence on this region. By the year 2000, the Gulf alone will earn $290 billion a year from its oil exports. Economies of the nations of the Gulf will expand rapidly, and the Gulf will be an exporter of capital. If history is any guide, some of that capital will flow to sister nations in the Arab world to finance their growth and generate employment and production. But Arab capital will not come to Morocco, nor to Egypt, nor to other nations of the Middle East and the Maghreb if your countries cannot offer an open market for investment. Gifts by one government to another will not assure growth. Such largesse usually promotes consumption. Real growth in production and jobs comes as the result of investment, especially private investment. It is also essential as we face the future that voices not be heeded which call to take this country or others out of the modern age, out of the international marketplace. The laws of economics are iron. Economies will not perform which fail to allow interest rates to arbitrate freely in financial markets, which exclude women from the workplace, which abolish income and consumption taxes, which are the lifeblood of modern state budgets. This country is unique among the nations of the Arab world in the depth of her relations with Europe and America on the one hand and with the Arab world on the other. Morocco knows there is no truth in locking people into a prison of false tradition and isolation from the competition of modern ideas. It is a challenge to your generation to integrate these ideas of the ideas of the West and the traditions of your society in a manner which is dynamic and productive. And the American School has given you many of the tools to do this. I have a second message, this time for Americans. If I believe young Moroccans face a future of promise if they work hard, I'm equally convinced that young Americans can look forward to a safer and better world if they are prepared to be realistic, continue the sacrifices our country has made for decades, and preserve and expand freedom. Americans have much on their minds these days. Our industrial base is aged and needs modernization. Our educational system cries out for a new commitment to excellence. Our environment demands protection. The less fortunate in our society need care and opportunity. Our health system must be overhauled and made financially sound. Above all, Americans have got to get to work and rebuild their economy, one which will live by its productivity, an economy which knows how to compete in a world marketplace. As awesome and demanding as these challenges are, they must not blind Americans to our responsibilities towards the world, responsibilities which spring from solid self-interest. Over the past 50 years, Americans have gone to war more times than I would like to remember to defend our country and to fight for freedom. We have spent billions to maintain the peace. We have poured treasure forth to strengthen our alliances, develop the economies of our friends, and resist the tides of totalitarianism. The threats we faced made us citizens of an interdependent world. The perseverance of Americans and the steadiness of our friends and allies paid off. The changes in Europe and the Soviet Union over the past year are the reward for our effort. But the enemies of freedom are many, and they are not far away. They come not only from totalitarian systems. They are rooted in poverty, despair, and strife. 1989 and 1990 saw an end to the communist world. It did not bring with it an end to adversity and violence across much of this world's surface. The Sahara remains an object of violence. World peace and American interest are threatened by the unresolved Arab-Israeli dispute, Iraq and Iran's legacy of war, conflict on the Horn of Africa, civil war in Lebanon, and Afghanistan's lingering struggle. In fact, to make matters worse, we now face the awesome prospect of proliferating weapons of mass destruction. Certain as we stand here in this time of freedom's renaissance, we will be faced with fresh threats to ourselves if we, as Americans, do not attend to the world's needs. Its needs are our needs. They will not be met if we slash our defenses, chop our assistance budgets into ever smaller pieces, shrink our diplomatic missions, fail to deal with the developing world debt crisis, and maintain trade barriers which impede our growth, just as they deny opportunity to developing economies. We must, in short, maintain our alliances, continue our assistance programs, exercise vigorous diplomacy in the pursuit of peace, and fight for open marketplaces, free ideas, and human rights. Americans like those present today who have had the privilege of living abroad understand these essential truths better than most of our fellow countrymen. I count on you to carry the message that America's best interests, indeed her very survival, depend on our continued involvement in the world's affairs, involvement which must be measured in terms of understanding of other nations' cultures and politics, an instinct to fight for what we believe, a willingness to sacrifice and share our wealth, and a readiness to build a common future of peace and prosperity. 1989 and 1990 must not for Americans be a repetition of 1918, when we called our troops home and walked away from our responsibility to international peace, security, and welfare. 1989 and 1990 must be like the 1940s, when we as Americans committed ourselves to the United Nations, collective security agreements, and undertook to share our prosperity with our friends worldwide. We have accomplished much, but we need to have the vision to carry on. Our prosperity and security will be greater for it. To you, young Moroccans and young Americans today, I extend my best wishes as you leave this school and enter into an exciting age. To the headmaster, my old friend, the administration and faculty of the American School of Tangier, I extend my thanks and equally warm wishes for your continued success in building bridges between the United States and nations of this part of the world, and in producing young men and women who have mastered diversity and whose knowledge and discipline will equip them to build for peace and prosperity. وآخرا أوجه لكم أيها الشباب أطيب الأمنيات وأنتم تتركون هذه المدرسة لتدخلوا عصرا مثيرا عملا مليئا بالعمل الجاد والتقدم، ومتمنيا لكم مستقبلا رائعا في حياتكم. وأتمنى أيضا لهذا البلد العظيم كل تقدم وازدهار في ظل جلالة الملك الحسن الثاني الذي يعمل دائما من أجل خير البلاد وتقدمها. كما أوجه شكري أيضا للسيد مدير المدرسة والإداريين لهيئة التدريس للمدرسة بجهدهم المستمر في بناء الجسور بين الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية والمملكة المغربية. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
When I turned 40 a few years ago, I took quite seriously the cliche that life begins at 40. It carved out a unique character. I believe we are different from other schools and that we take pride in that difference. I believe that we are somewhat old-fashioned in comparison with what has happened to American education in the past 30 years. And I believe that our insistence on traditional basics is the only way that sound education can be achieved. I know, too, that the school's character has been determined by this dramatic and splendid city of Tangier, this magnificent and magical kingdom of Morocco, where tolerance and the interplay of various nationalities produces a deep respect for individuality. To me, individuality and independence are two of the most cherished American values.
أنا شفت الأولاد من الأرض
سبتها مع فؤاد فقدم الضيف.
أيوة إذا هنا يعني نتكلم عليه. في وقت شفتي والله يعني نهار جميل. Hi, you're wonderful. Congratulations. That was really a super day. You speak English. You speak English. Your mother is very proud of you. So we all are. We all are. That's right. لا 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 28
Your Highness, Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, Count de Gatine, Mr. Chairman, honored guests. It is a privilege to have with us today on the platform the Princess Lala Fatima Zora, His Excellency Mr. Alal Sadawi, Governor of the Province of Tangier, His Excellency Mr. Marc Charles Ginsberg, Ambassador of the United States to the King of Morocco, the Count de Gatine Domine, economist who has come from Paris to deliver the commencement address. Mr. Driss Drissi, Chairman of the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees. The American School of Tangier for many years has had a warm relationship with the Amalak. We are very grateful to Governor Sadawi for his support to the school and for the many favors which he has offered to the school. It is a privilege to introduce to you today His Excellency Mr. Alal Sadawi, Governor of the Province of Tangier. With President Clinton's election, the American community as well as the diplomatic community watched with curiosity as to whom the President would appoint as his ambassador to Morocco. And it was with great appreciation that all of us in Morocco saw the arrival of a young, energetic, optimistic and positive ambassador, Marc Charles Ginsberg, and his equally attractive wife, Jen. Ambassador Ginsberg holds degrees from the American University and Georgetown University, and before coming to Morocco, practiced law in Washington. He has been active in the Democratic Party and has been sensitive to foreign policy, particularly in the Middle East. I'm especially pleased to introduce to you the Honorable Marc Charles Ginsberg, American Ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco.
You look like a wonderful audience, and while it may be a bit warm for you, I want to say that you also had an equally warm-looking graduation class. You look terrific, and it's a pleasure and an honor for me to be here with you today, because it's an honor for me to be in Morocco, to be able to address you. Your Excellency, Your Highness, Governor and Count, Mr. Driss, it's a pleasure to be here. And of course, it's a pleasure, Mr. McPhillips, for me to be here with you today and with the faculty of this wonderful institution. Indeed, it is not only a proud moment for you, but it is a proud moment for me. I have already had the pleasure to briefly tour the school a few months ago, and you may recall that I checked up on you to make sure that you'd be sitting where you are today. And indeed, I'm delighted to see that you're sitting where you should be. When I was last in Tangier, I toured our former American legation, the oldest American diplomatic post in the world, and I was pleased to read George Washington's famous letter to the Sultan of Morocco, in which our first president expressed his gratitude for friendship and peace. Since George Washington wrote that famous letter, the United States and Morocco have been partners for peace. We are working side by side to forge a true and lasting peace in the Middle East. We are working to stem radicalism and oppression in the region. We are cooperating on many fronts to further the cause of democracy and the development of market economies in the Middle East and North Africa. Indeed, Morocco itself has become the envy of other nations under the prudent leadership of Morocco's rulers. I've arrived to lend a helping hand to our good and close friend, the Kingdom of Morocco. President Clinton sent me here because he is committed to the prosperity, security, and stability of Morocco. In fact, just several weeks ago, when President Clinton was in France during the commemoration of the Normandy landings, he said that the United States has a great stake in promoting governments like the Moroccan government. The President also singled out King Hassan as a leader who has served as a very responsible leader, and who has been helpful in peace in the Middle East, and indeed in many other ways. At a time when America and the world are exploring uncharted seas and forging new rules of international order, we are fortunate that we can turn to King Hassan for his help and guidance. And with your help, we can make Morocco a better place. All of its people can benefit from its remarkable economic. But life is really about finding your place, carving out a personal and professional life that brings comfort and happiness to you and to your loved ones. You may find an odd occupation, whatever an odd occupation may mean these days. You may be conventional. You may become a scientist. You may become a technician on the information superhighway. Or you may find satisfaction as a volunteer, helping the cause of peace, or a doctor in a far-off land, helping to save lives. There is a reason why you are graduating from a school that has the name American in the middle of it. Perhaps some of you were born or raised in America, while others of you have come to know America through this little outpost of American values. Whether you are American, or Moroccan, or of other nationality, you have received a first-class American education here in Tangier. At an early age, Americans' youth are taught that democratic values, which make our country a beacon among nations, are the values that guide us through our education. You and I may not have noticed it, but your teachers have been well paid. I hope they've been well paid. Have they been well paid? To teach you how to think, not just what to think. How to express yourself freely, not just how to repeat what they want you to say. How to stand for principle and passion without fear of retribution. How to work well as a team, not just to take orders. Indeed, how to pursue happiness. This is what democracy is all about. It is about freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom from intolerance and persecution. But democracy does not come at an insignificant price. As President Clinton said just a few days ago, and I quote, "Our nation," referring to the United States, was founded on the belief that our democratic values are worth fighting to make democracy and Islam work in tandem as one hand works well with the other. There is nothing incompatible between Islam and democracy. Rather, there is a complete divide between democracy, America, and those who would hijack Islam in the name of oppression, terrorism, and fear. We, the United States, draw the line against those who preach justice but practice injustice. Extremism, whether under the veil of Islam or secular nationalism, leads to the same result. You and I cannot permit these forces to rob us, Morocco, or this region of a prosperous and democratic future. Indeed, the Middle East is faced with two paths and two futures. One path leads to a future where despots wielding weapons of mass destruction seek choice, market economies, and the free exchange of ideas and goods across borders open to trade and democratic values. Indeed, graduating class, in little ways you can make a difference for democracy. You can help make your community flourish. You can champion the cause of human rights. You can protest the denial of liberty. You can train people to form unions and associations. You can help journalists understand the role of a free press. You can help others from succumbing to the enticing call of Islam, uttered from those with motives incompatible with Islam. By putting your foot down and defending your homeland and its future, you can become democracy's builders. While you advance your education to become a scientist, a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever, you must take the time to stand up for democracy and against those who would rob you of the freedom of choice that you have so rightly earned in this wonderful school. So make democracy part of your life's work. Do not be wedded to one path. There are many roads to follow it. But whatever you do, practice it all the days of your life. And so in closing, may I thank you for this privilege to be here with you today. I thank the director, Mr. McPhillips, for the opportunity to have witnessed this wonderful graduating class and to wish you all much success in the future. Congratulations, you are to be commended for succeeding, and now on to more success.
ضيوف الكرام، سيداتي وسادتي متخرجي هذه السنة، مرحبا بكم لحفل المدرسي السنوي. باسم المجلس الإداري أود أن أنتهز هذه الفرصة لكي أؤكد للآباء مرة أخرى تعهدنا للقيام بموهبتنا وبأهدافنا المدروسة آملين هذا النهج الطويل لمدرستنا مع النظر في نفس الوقت إلى إمكانيات تكوين استمرار هذه المؤسسة. Graduates, in the name of the Board of Trustees, I congratulate you and wish you the best of luck in whatever you do. Work hard, diligently, always do the best. Last but not least, thank the headmaster, faculty, and administration for yet another successful year. Thank you.
As every year passes, I become increasingly aware of the uniqueness of this school. It is an institution that strives for academic excellence and achievement, but it is also a school which creates a special and unusual atmosphere. It is difficult to define the mood of a place and to explain its cause, but I am sure that much of what is recognized as the feeling of this school comes from a mingling of nationalities, of races and religions, and a respect for individuality and diversity. Perhaps the school simply reflects the spirit of Tangier and Morocco. I believe, too, that the school has come to project its own sense of style, whether in its drama productions, its athletic events, of the flowers at graduation. At the American School of Tangier, we try to say no to the commonplace and yes to the exceptional. I believe that we aspire to be sound and perhaps old-fashioned in our approach to education, that we encourage quality without snobbery and distinction without exclusiveness as we go about our lives together. Finally, I believe the school has created an atmosphere of caring, of concern, of love. I think as you seniors go through life, you will find that the American School of Tangier has given you high standards by which to measure the activities and events, places and people that will fill your lives. I wish to thank the Board of Trustees for its support, the parents for their understanding and sympathy, the faculty for their labor of love, the administration for its endurance, and the students for being who they are. I wish Sandy McMillan much good luck in the future. He has reinforced my belief in our college motto. I regret very much Jan Walker's departure, and I want to thank her for her work and for coming to the rescue of this school this past fall. And I wish Katie Minor happiness in her move to England. For all of us who remain, I believe we all have the good fortune to live in Morocco. And I ask God to bless this country and America, and I wish the seniors Godspeed.
ديمقراطي وشاف العالم قبل ما بدك يقرا العالم كيعيش ولا بدك الواقع ديال الطبيعه